guess we'll have to go with this. Morning, everyone. Well, I guess good afternoon now. It's past mid-noon. Some excellent speeches from Scott and Simon. Thank you very much. I absolutely agree with Scott about diversity of ecosystems. I think that's a key point that he made. Obviously, as consumers, we like seeing diversity. You like going to the store and having a choice. But as developers, that diversity is important as well. HTML5 came up quite a few times, I think, and we saw different versions of it. And I think it's pretty clear that there's still a way to go for HTML5 to win developers' hearts and people's hearts. I think part of the problem from RIM's perspective, I just want to say that it is. If you look at other platforms, HTML5 is treated as a second-class citizen. And you look at some newer platforms, I think Microsoft's doing a bit of this, and RIM with the new BlackBerry 10 platform. We need to treat HTML5 as a first-class citizen. The issues that Simon talked about is something that could be solved in the platform, right? So the limitations, the complexity that he referred to as, it's something that consciously a platform can actually try to solve. So once we get to that stage, with BlackBerry 10 and other platforms like Microsoft, I think you will see more and more native applications being built using HTML5. And so I encourage you to come to the your browser's, your SDK session if you want to learn on how to create those native apps, not using PhoneGap, not using some third-party framework, but using direct HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript to create native functions within your applications. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a bit and talk a bit about design. Okay. Designing your applications, talking about flow, connection, and extension. Okay, how many of you here actually wear a watch? Okay, well, still quite a few. I don't wear one, as you can see. I usually just look at my smartphone, right, when you want to check the time. Today, if you want to check the time on your phone, you got to take it out of your holster, press a button, fumble, find the right button, and actually take a look at the time. It's not as easy as glancing at your watch, right? With BlackBerry 10, to wake up the device, you simply do a sliding gesture, and with the sunrise effect, the screen just flows and reveals the time to you. It just flows. It's like glancing at your watch. Just as an example. Here's another example. How many of you have, and this happens I think every day, probably every single day, you read an email, you're reading a very important email, if you're in the middle of this long email, reading it on your phone, and another notification comes in, that LED starts flashing or the phone starts buzzing, there's an important message. Now today, if you have to go find out what's going on, you have to close the message you're reading, you guessed it, you lose your context, go find the message that just came in, figure out whether that message was important or not, and if it's not, you've lost your context. You have to go back to your old message, find where that was, maybe it came 2 days ago, open that up, scroll down to where you were, and you're back there. Not a great user experience, right? With BlackBerry 10, with Flow in BlackBerry 10, we've actually introduced this peak gesture. So now, if a notification comes in, you see the LED, you experience that the device is buzzing. It's as easy as holding two pieces of paper and sliding them. You can slide back and look at your inbox. You can see that, okay, there's a new message that just came in from Jane Lord. That's not important. I can read that later. And you go back to your message. You just release, and you're reading. You're never left your message. You're in that context. Your context is preserved. That's called preserving the flow. This is important. Any psychology majors here? Nobody? Oh, there's. I don't know if you are. If you may have you read the work of Mihai. I'm gonna slaughter his last name. Csikszentmihalyi. I don't know. I'm not Hungarian, but. He is the architect for the term, in a psychological sense, the term flow. So he defines flow as a mental state of being. It's about being immersed into an activity, being energized, being fully involved, not being distracted, being focused in it, right? So we use this definition to come up with a few principles when designing flow in BlackBerry 10. And this is important because this is important for you as a developer to take advantage of this. First step was to eliminate barriers, right? And access to information. It's just too hard doing things. It's just too many barriers to get there. Reducing those barriers. Putting the user in control or making the user feel like they're in control. That's important. The feeling of being in control is important, even though you could do something and make the user in control, but if they don't feel like they're not in control, they're not in control. They have to feel it. They have to feel the every single pixel on the screen, they're able to control that. Every single interaction, they have control over. Providing that structure and focus. You can't have too many distractions. Right? A screen full of all these icons and notifications and status bars and title bars and tickers and all that is not an ideal mobile experience. Giving feedback. And this is my personal favorite because feedback doesn't just necessarily mean, when you press on a keyboard, you get feedback, right? It's the subtle cues. It's the attention to detail. It's the little things that don't distract the user but make the experience pleasurable. Make it enjoyable. And I think the BlackBerry 10 keyboard is a perfect example of how it embodies these 4 principles. So the keyboard in BlackBerry 10, as you type, words start to appear on top of the keyboard. They flow on top of the keyboard. So you as a user, if you like something that you see, if you're not used to this, you can still use a keyboard. But if it's something that attracts you, hey, I'm trying to write the word right. You simply flick your finger, and the word flows on top, onto the screen, and into the actual space. So that feeling of flicking a word up and actually seeing it physically move up to where you want it to is a fulfilling experience. I think that's important. That's what we mean by flow. So what does it mean for an app developer? So I'm going to use the fantasy football case study here. So here's a third-party application. How does it use this concept of flow? Well, the first thing, this concept of flow using the peek gesture is important for notifications. Similarly, as you saw the example of the email message, if you're within the application, if you're within this fantasy football application, if a new message comes in, you get this flow for free. The user can do a single gesture to swipe up from the bottom to almost minimize the screen, but they can still see it. This is an active screen. And they can take a peek, a quick glance at what is this notification. It's an email message. I'm not expecting an email right now, I can wait. So they can release that gesture, and the reversal of gesture is important. That's the key to peeking and flowing. Everything the user does, they should be able to undo easily. So when you release the gesture, you're back into your own application. You're back in that state, preserving the context of the user, right? And this is not only true outside your application, but even within the application. You could have different notifications coming within your applications. Maybe it's stock pushes, or maybe it's content updates being pushed. Lots of notifications going on. How do you stop the user from being distracted? How do you preserve the flow? Well, in BlackBerry 10, we have this sidebar for in-app notifications. So you see there's a new update in the news column. So that user can look at that, peek at that sidebar again without being distracted, without leaving their context. And they say, oh, it's just a news item. It's not critical. They have to make a choice. They have to make a choice whether they want to react now, in which case they switch the tab, they click on the actual icon in the bar, or they undo the gesture. They're back where they started. They never left. And same with navigation. This is all components that are free for you in this platform, because we've consciously baked this into the platform for developers. When new screens come up, when you're navigating quickly within screens, you don't have to hit the back button. Why should you have to hit the back button? You just slide back, and you see reference what you're looking at. And again, make that decision whether you want to flow back or you remain where you are. So we're going to look at a few other examples. Context menu. And this is important, because context menu usually, if you think they're not new concept, but they tend to be very modal. If you understand UX, you understand modal means they tend to block the user interface, block the user from what they're looking at. Whereas in this case, if you hold the menu, hold the item, the context menu flows from the right, and you can see the little icons. As you drag your finger over those icons, it actually pops out the display text to show you what the actual text is. Again, very fluid. You release it, and you're back to where you are. This is my favorite, cards. I'm not sure where we're going on with the screen there, but anyway. Essentially, the concept of cards is it breaks down barriers between applications. We've heard about things like Chappy, content handlers, MIME types. Well, with cards, if you have to look at a PDF today, you click on, within your application, you invoke the PDF reader application, and it launches a PDF reader and shows your PDF. With cards, the user never leaves their application. The card is like an application, but it launches within the same context, just like another screen. So the information can be rendered within the application. The user feels like they're within your application, they never left. And so this concept is open to the platform. Anybody can create cards. So you can create cards for PDFs, for different MIME types, and you can create your own cards for your application. So other applications could call you. It's breaking down barriers. It's a full integration. So with BlackBerry 10, gone are the days of doing one task at a time. Gone are the days of losing your context and fumbling, and gone are the days of using the home button to task switch. Some platforms would like to call it multitasking. It's not multitasking, it's task switching, right? It's not multitasking if you have to hit a button to switch to another task, right? That's not multitasking. BlackBerry 10 allows you to create integrated applications that allow you to integrate into the platform using all the native APIs, things like the unified inbox with notifications. There's social applications, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, BBM. All these frameworks are ready for you to hook into. And they're beautiful. So here I want to show you a quick demo of what we mean by flow and how you can use it in the application. So you can play that video.
If we think about how to use this in the BlackBerry Flow and the BlackBerry Hub, how do you deal with integrated messaging, calendar performance? Show us how it works, Vivek.
Sure. So getting from Peak to the Hub is really easy. I continue to pull up anywhere on the screen, and I'll just move along to an app. And if I move across to the right, you can see the BlackBerry Hub underneath, always accessible in this single gesture.
So please understand that wherever you are on this device, Vivek, right? Whatever you do,
Absolutely.
right? It is this one single swipe gesture that gets you to the BlackBerry Hub, that gets you into action from wherever you are, correct?
Absolutely. And as I get into the Hub, you can see everything's integrated. Whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, my email, BBM, everything is inside this entire Hub.
And the way it works is you decide what gets in your hub, right? It's not being imposed on you. It is your decision of how you create and how you build that hub, correct?
Absolutely. And with BlackBerry Flow, it just makes it so easy, as you can see.
Look at that.
Moving across between different accounts.
It is amazing. I love it. And again, watching Vivek and what he's doing, please recall that he has not called any application yet, right? He does everything that he's doing within this hub and with this spectacular BlackBerry Flow user paradigm.
Exactly.
Great. So as you saw, that was an example with our own native email application. This is something that's open to developers to use for their own applications as well. So that's what we mean by flow. I'm going to switch gears a bit here and talk about connectivity, interconnectivity specifically. How many people here are familiar with the term ubiquitous computing? Oh, a few. Okay. What it means is basically when computers disappear, they weave into the fabric of life, technology becomes invisible, and people use it unconsciously. It's an interesting concept if you think about it. But if you think about the world we live in today, we're not there. We use computers very consciously. We use smartphones very consciously, right? So when I think about ubiquitous computing, it's basically connecting people with devices, and essentially, it's that flow. It's preserving that flow of going from your home to your car, to your work, and preserving that context, doing it unconsciously. So it's liberating the technology from its use cases. And the reason this doesn't exist today is for a couple of reasons. A, because we have either closed ecosystems, Apple as an example, or we have ecosystems that are too open, like Android. They're too fragmented. So what we need is a bit of both. We need a bit of curated openness to actually have ecosystems that are built on open standards. Standards within specific industries. And the auto industry is actually a good example of this. They're working very consciously and proactively to create work open standards. They're actually looking at HTML5 very seriously. And we're working with the worldwide consortium for automotive standards in HTML5. So think about, they're saying, the auto industry says that today, most of the new cars, they will actually tether with your mobile phone for connectivity. I think that already exists. But the prediction is in the next 5 years, over 50% of vehicles are going to have an onboard modem. They're not going to need tethering. They're going to be connected to the internet. And we talk about this a lot. When we talk about interconnectivity, we talk about connecting things to the internet. Oh, it's connected. But we don't talk about how is the conversation happening. We don't talk about preserving context. We don't talk about standards. We don't talk about how do you communicate. We mentioned SOAP. Scott mentioned SOAP. So Scott mentioned all these amazing protocols that exist we've gone through that motion within the computer realm. But we don't talk about those when we're talking about interconnecting devices. How does a car know what your smartphone is going to speak, right? And vice versa. So imagine a world in the next 5 years where you've got these connected cars, right? Gone are the days of having out-of-date map data. I mean, that's the most. I hate car dash navigation systems because usually the streets are wrong. The map is out of date. You got to plug them in and actually update them. But think about cloud connectivity. Think about having map data, space recognition in the cloud. Think about maintenance information. When you need an oil check, you have a problem in the car, that data gets pushed to the cloud to your mechanic or to your dealer, right? The technology for this exists today. It's the industries and the auto industry being a good example, they're working quite proactively to create that, those standards using HTML5 and other technologies. Imagine a world where if you want to go to a restaurant, you're sitting on your couch, on your tablet, find this new place, looks great, you leave your tablet, pick up your smartphone, the context gets passed to your smartphone, you go into your vehicle, you sit down, and the context gets passed from the smartphone to the car dashboard, and you navigate to your destination. Right? It's not too far away. So I want to give you an example of how we're actually trying to help and working closely with the auto industry. Many people may not know that BlackBerry 10 is actually built on those open standards. It's built on the industry powerhouse QNX. QNX today is used in over 25 million vehicles, over 200 car models already. It actually powers mission-critical systems such as internet routers, nuclear power plants, medical devices. This is what BlackBerry 10 is built on. And hopefully in the next few years, you'll see some changes happening in these industries. So let's take an example of what do we mean by connectivity and a connected ecosystem. Can you play the last video?
This is a new revolutionary mobile computing engine that we have built. Let's take a look at this connected car. This car in itself is a connected ecosystem. What it does, based on BlackBerry 10, is it has a telematic unit, it has the dashboard, it has screens in the back, for example, for video conferencing or for gaming. Now, these are not 4 different devices. They're all run from one single mobile computing platform, which is BlackBerry 10. That is the power of BlackBerry 10. That is the purpose of BlackBerry 10.
Thank you very much.